civic
What will
procedure.
happen if you don't?
For the sake of our children, please delay the vote until all information has been
It takes a
revealed.
majority or 270 electors to win the presidency. And we in Minnesota will cast 10 of those electoral votes. Now, the Constitution, as you probably know from your civics class, the Constitution created the Electoral College, but the Constitution
To
is
appease
silent.
the slave states.
The Constitution is silent as to how each state chooses to allocate its electoral votes. Minnesota long ago chose to do what 47 other states already do. That is to say, we allocate all of our state's electoral votes to the winner of the statewide popular vote. That's how we do it. That's how 47 other states do it. But not all states use that method. 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, allocate their electoral votes according to which candidate wins each congressional district in their state.
Electors can refuse to vote.
This allows states to split their electoral
that
votes
right.
amongst different candidates. Now, some people have suggested that more states move to the Maine and Nebraska model. Others have suggested a move to the national popular vote model, by which states would agree to award their electoral votes to the overall winner of the national popular vote, instead of to the winner of the popular vote in that particular state. And then, of course, there are others who want to abolish the Electoral College entirely.
Yes.
Now, whether we as Americans,
Yes.
whether we as Americans
Let's start
or we as
today.
Minnesotans wish to change the way that we select future presidents and vice presidents will be an ongoing subject of debate. But our law in Minnesota today is clear, and today we honor that law. Of course, today's event comes after a long national election campaign, and I think many in this room would agree that it was a particularly significant campaign, and it was uniquely intense.
With foreign infiltration.
The incumbent president was term limited, so we knew we were going to elect a new president no matter what. And there was another factor at play, and let's be honest. We had 2 major party nominees who inspired very strong feelings. That's just a fact. Now, that kind of intensity, those strong feelings, that can lead to opposite kinds of results. So sometimes that kind of intensity can depress voter turnout, because voters may feel overwhelmed, or disillusioned, or even disgusted. But sometimes that kind of intensity leads to higher voter turnout,
Or
because
suppression.
voters feel an
Every
urgency
vote
to
can
act
count.
or to make their voices heard. And in Minnesota, we chose action. We chose to turn out to vote in very high numbers, and we made history in the process. Now let me just tell you a
Let's
few
make
of the
some more
ways.
history.
Let me just tell you a few of the ways
History
that
has its eyes
Minnesotans
on
made
you.
history this year. More Minnesotans than ever before, over 670,000, cast their ballots early by voting absentee, thanks to a new law called No Excuses Absentee Voting, which allows anyone to vote early for any reason. And I know there are a lot of people in this room who were involved, as was I when I was in the legislature, in getting that legislation passed on a bipartisan basis. More Minnesotans than ever before were registered to vote on Election Day, thanks to a new law that allows people to register to vote online. More Minnesotans than ever before cast a general election ballot. Nearly 3 million people in Minnesota, a record. And lastly, my personal favorite, but first some background. Many of you know that Minnesota has an outstanding history of high voter turnout. In fact, for 9 elections in a row, Minnesota was #1 in the country in voter turnout until 2014, until 2 years ago. After a winning streak of #1s, in 2014 we slipped a bit to #6 in the country. Now, the #6 spot was still decent, right? If you're grading on a curve, 6 out of 50, not bad. But not quite up to our usual high Minnesota standards. So, during the past year, my office challenged Minnesotans to get us back to #1. Thousands of partners throughout the state worked to reach that goal. And in my office, we approached voter engagement in a fundamentally different way. We tried new approaches, we took advantage of the new laws that I mentioned, and we reached out to new communities. And I'm happy to say that when the ballots were counted in all the states on November 8th, Minnesota was again #1 in the country in voter turnout. 74.7% of all eligible Minnesotans voted in this year's election. Now, being #1 in America is saying something, and that should make us proud. We set a goal, and we reached it. But more importantly than that, we set an example for other states and for people in our own state, like many of you, who are not yet eligible to vote, but who will one day be eligible to vote, perhaps in the next couple of years. Now, we can stay on top, and we can lead the way for America if we step up, stand up, and commit to being voters. Let's recognize all the people right now throughout Minnesota who helped get Minnesota back to #1 in voter turnout.